Hello and very good morning. Hi, Dr. Mark. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Vikram. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy Friday. How are you doing?
Happy Friday to you too. Yeah, very well. It's a beautiful day here in Sydney, Australia, so I have nothing to complain.
Same here. Beautiful day in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I know you're 3 hours ahead of me, so a nice, bright morning to you and to everyone else in the audience. Well, we are here on the 13th episode of the Curious Mind series. I'm Vikram. I'm going to be your host for literally a nice, bright Friday morning here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as well as down under, as they say in Sydney, Australia, wherein we are on a mission to resolve curious queries relating to a particular area or a field of work and add value to our guest, which is you, the audience, by providing relevant and candid information in a very unfiltered manner. So as of today, we have been caught up with the buzzwords going around in circles, which is AI, artificial intelligence, or digital future. That is what everybody talks. This is going to be our future. This is where we are right now, and its major impact on humankind, which is happening literally today. There is no networking session. There is no conference. There is no meeting. There is no office meeting which is happening wherein the buzzwords of AI or digital future have been spoken about. So everybody is talking about it, but very few really know about it. So we are going to, as we embrace this into our lives, we thought it is really important and imperative to understand how we humanize our digital future. So we have nobody else but the most celebrated speaker in this space, Dr. Mark Van Rijmenam. I hope I have spelled your surname correctly, Dr. Mark. Is that okay?
Perfect.
A thumbs up on that?
Thank you very Vikram.
Okay. He's there with our guest speaker today. And on we are going to talk about he's a futurist. We are going to talk about humanizing our digital future and its various facets, plus the positives and a little bit of the cons. So we are extremely fortunate to have you, Mark, with us today. How do you feel? What are you looking forward to this podcast? To the fact that you don't know what am I going to ask you?
Well, I'm looking forward to an insightful conversation about the future of technology, how we can create, a future where sort of a thriving digital future where we all stand to benefit, and how we can empower you, the listener, the watcher, the viewer, on what role you play in crafting the future that we want. Because I think that's we're all players in building the future of tomorrow, building the future. So it's not something that you can sit back and relax and happen to you. You are an active participant in structuring and in building the future that you want. And I would say let's create a future which is beneficial to us, where it's a thriving digital future instead of a very dystopic future.
Fantastic, fantastic. We couldn't be more honored and humbled to have you with us. Now, for the audience, I'm sure all of you would have looked up on Dr. Mark's LinkedIn kind of profile today. That is our kind of digital presence. So you would have looked up for it. But just to give you a little brief, and I'm going to keep it really brief because you can go into LinkedIn, you can check Dr. Mark's profile. Not only check his profile, he also has his own website, which is called The Digital Speaker, if I'm not wrong. And it's an
Right.
amazingly very well made website for people who are very much interested to go out there and watch. So, Dr. Mark is a strategic futurist known as the digital speaker who lives and breathes emerging technologies. He's a renowned international speaker in our speaking world, a global speaking fellow, GSF, a certified speaking professional. Just to let you know, a lot of audience, it is very difficult to get these connotations added to your name. He's a global guru in the category of a futurist, a five-time author, and someone who's spoken in 30 countries across all the continents. Possessing a deep understanding of AI, blockchain, the metaverse, and other technologies, he blends academic rigor with technology innovation. His pioneering efforts include the world's first TED Talk in VR. In 2023, he further pushed the boundaries when delivering a TED Talk in Athens with his digital twin, delving into the complex interplay of AI and perception of reality. In 2024, he launched a digital twin of himself, offering on demand conversations via text, audio, or video in not one but 29 languages, thereby bridging the gap between the digital and the physical world, another world's first. He also runs a podcast called the Synthetic Minds Podcast. And this I came to know, Dr. Mark, when I was doing a little research about you, which is a thought provoking podcast where the boundary between the imagined, what we imagine, and the real blurs as we traverse from a science fiction to a science reality is explored. So before we go on to this journey, and this is going to be my major talking because the guest is Dr. Mark and not me. But before we kickstart this interesting conversation, as always, let me reiterate to you the essence of the Curious Mind series, which is that the guest speaker, which is Dr. Mark in this case, is only aware of the topic. We only agreed to the topic, which is humanizing the digital future. He is not aware of the questions I'm going to ask him, the questions which are going to come from you. So this is a great opportunity for you to go on to either, if you're watching us on LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live, go out there, type in your comments or questions and shoot it right up here. We will pop them up right here. So he's not aware what are the questions we are going to shoot at him. So all his answers are going to be unfiltered, non-edited in a live format, totally based on his skills, competencies, experience, personality over the years. And yes, there was no scope or opportunity I gave to Dr. Mark to check these questions via either a chat GPT or any other AI tool because he has absolutely no clue what am I going to ask. Are you ready, Dr. Mark, with this?
I am always ready.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get the ball rolling. Now, for somebody, and I have kind of done a little research on your profile just to kind of warm it up a bit. For somebody who began his journey with a bachelor's in hospital management, probably a couple of decades ago, what brought you into this futurist space over the years? We are keen to know about your journey, so you can share a little bit about your journey. And did you anticipate that this is what the future would look like probably 20 years back?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the extensive introduction. There's one thing I'd like to add to that introduction, which I think is quite relevant, and that is that I consider myself as an optimistic dystopian, which I know it's a bit of an oxymoron, but it sort of helps me understand, both the good, the bad, and the ugly of this emerging technologies. Because if we want to end up in this thriving digital future, we have to be able to mitigate the risks that inherently come with these technologies as well. Now, to answer your question, so I've been in the global speaking business over I think 12 years at the moment, and I indeed started in the hospitality industry 25 years ago, and that sort of reveals a bit about my age. It's from there I've moved on. After living in Dubai for some time, I've moved on to the financial institution. I worked at ING head office in Amsterdam for several years. But I quickly noticed that the corporate world, working for inside the corporate world, it was not my cup of tea. So I decided to start my own company in 2011. After I've been on an adventure, I actually cycled around Australia in 2011 in 100 days to raise money for a children's cancer fund, which is an amazing story. I actually published an article about that, I think 2 days ago, because I really wanted to revisit the story and I sort of link it to my role as a futurist that I have today. And so in the past 12 years, I've moved from focusing on big data to blockchain to crypto to the metaverse and now AI. Probably next year or so, it will be quantum computing. And so I really, I move along with the different technologies. But I take a very much a strategic perspective to these technologies and understand how they are impacting Fortune 500 companies, how they're impacting governments all around the world. Because for most of us, it's very difficult to understand what's happening. And these technologies are abstract. We are busy leading our lives. We have our family. We have our work that we have to take care of. And so we don't really have the time to think about what it means that these technologies and how they will impact our professional life as well as our personal lives. And that's my job. That's what I do. And it's also where I notice that a lot of people struggle with that, because we're living in this enormous information overload society. And that's why I'm also building an AI startup myself at the moment. So we're actually building a company called Futuristic, which will help you cut through the noise of this information overload to deliver hyper personalized insights tailored to you in any format, any language, so you can be in the know without being out of time. My trajectory from the past 12, 14 years has been really trying to help society move forward in a fast changing world. And I think that sort of comes back from my hospitality background, where you have this, this approach to society as a very a very social approach, very connecting people, trying to make the world a little bit of a better place. And so I bring that with me in everything that I do. And my objective is to create this digital future, which is something that we are looking forward to, and not something that we are afraid of.
Fantastic, fantastic. You shared so many insights into that. And I was going to touch base upon your 14,000 kilometers cycling journey across Australia, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a very noble cause. If you can quickly touch base upon it, why you did it, what was the essence for a people. And I know I did read your article a couple of days back, which you published, but just for our audience out here, 14,000 kilometers across Australia. What was your intention? What did you achieve from that? And how was the experience?
Well, like all good stories, it started in the pub. And yeah, my friend and I, we were
Over a
talking
beer.
about, let's do a great adventure. And we shook hands at that moment. It took another 5 years before we actually started doing it, and started actually preparing and moving forward. And we just wanted an adventure. And when we decided we wanted to invent an adventure, we decided, okay, if we are going to do an adventure, let's have an impact with that. So that's when we decided to raise money for Children's Cancer Fund in the Netherlands.
Wow.
We actually raised about 25,000 euros for that
Wow.
charity, and that was an amazing thing to do. But above all, from a personal perspective, it completely changed my life. It completely changed who I am, how I look at the world. And the things that I took away from this trip is that if you have the right mindset, if you have the focus, if you persevere in when the going gets tough, if you have discipline to show up every day and to get up every morning, if you have a positive mindset, and if you have the flexibility to change whenever you need to adapt, I think you can literally achieve anything that you want in your life. So these have become the pillars in my life of how I look at the world, and how I try to achieve what I want to achieve in my personal life. And they also are the pillars of how I try to help organizations, especially if we move into this exponential age where change is becoming faster and faster, and it's becoming harder and harder to adapt to that. So it's the lesson I learned 13 years ago when I cycled around the trip. I never imagined that I can, back then I would never imagine how I can apply them now in my role as a futurist, where I try to empower individuals and organizations to build the future that we want to see. But it's fantastic. It's a journey that I think about probably still on a daily basis, although it obviously become less. But it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life, which was it was really truly rewarding, and I'm very grateful that I was able to do it.
Fantastic. And not one, but two thumbs up to you for literally going on to that adventure. And for our audience who are watching this, in the last 30 seconds, probably Dr. Mark has given a gist of what it requires for you to be really, really successful through his cycling journey. Isn't that? So for anybody who's watching, the last 30 seconds was extremely crucial in there.
True.
Okay. That's great. Now, when again in your journey in the last 12 years, 11 years, 12 years in what you've been as a futurist, you have also founded a lot of organizations. If I were to count it right, and I might be totally wrong out here, probably five or more. What motivated you, or what inspired you to start these organizations? And I did a little bit of study around that, not much to be honest, but they were all in the futuristic space. And even what you mentioned just now, future wise, which is exactly to cut down the noise and kind of give a succinct view to people out there. So what is your vision or mission in terms of building these organizations and continuing to build? What's the thought behind
Well, first of all, yes, I've tried building quite a few organizations, and not all of them succeeded, which is you're fine.
it?
I think some startups have failed, and I've learned a lot from those failures. So I think it's better to try and fail than not to try at all. And it's from my focus has always been sort of how can we create a better society, and one of the things that we need to do to achieve that is we need to educate ourselves. So we need to become more knowledgeable about the future, about the stuff that is going to affect our future. And so I have a media platform around that called Dataflog, which is sort of where we publish interesting content around emerging technologies. The other thing is that I think what we need to have is we need to be able to trust the content that we read online, and I think that's becoming harder and harder every day, especially because of the rise of artificial intelligence, the rise of misinformation, the rise of deep fakes. It becomes harder and harder, and so that's why I had a company called Maven a couple of years ago, which tried to fight misinformation using blockchain and AI technologies. Unfortunately, that was one of the startups that failed because we were ahead of our time. But it's the lessons that I've learned from Maven are now incorporated in FutureWise. So actually, it was a very relevant journey that I went through for a couple of years. And so I think I'm just honestly driven by creating a better future, and a future where we are more in control, where we have a good understanding of what's the content that we can trust, and we can leverage that content to build that better future. But we you read more and more about the internet, that the internet is going to break down at some point because there's so much crap on the internet. There's so much misinformation.
Yes.
There's so many bots and trolls. And what can we trust and what can we not trust? And in a society where we can no longer trust the content that we consume, whether it's via text, audio, video, I do believe that society will collapse eventually. So it is rather important that we get this right. It's rather important that we're going to fix this. And personally, I think the way, just to give an example of how Elon Musk is now treating Twitter or X, is the wrong direction, because it only results in more misinformation, in more noise, in more bots and trolls acting and trying to push a message of actors who are not necessarily have the best intentions for humanity as a whole.
Humanity, yes.
And I think that's where we need to change, and that's my drive. I'm trying to build something that will have a net positive impact on humanity.
Fantastic. A very noble thought, and definitely you're driving not only us, for a lot of people in the right future, if we're to say. And I will come to Elon Musk, because there is a question around Elon Musk and what he does. So just park that for a thought for now. My next question, and before I move on to the next question, to our audience out here who are watching us live, and I know we've been said this much before. We go blind with these live podcasts, so we don't know who is watching us. But then, if you have a question, do give a thumbs up. If you can write it into the comment section, and I'll pop it up here, because this is your opportunity, and like Dr. Mark has the right intention, I have the right intention of giving an opportunity to everybody out there to ask a direct question in a live format to somebody like Dr. Mark with his experience, which he can then share right here with you. So the entire essence is to ask him anything at this point in time. Now, till you ask anything specific to the audience, I will continue on my journey. In your latest book, Dr. Mark, Future Visions, which is written in collaboration with AI, explores cutting edge technologies like the metaverse, AI, even quantum computing and 3D printing, painting a vivid picture of how they may reshape our world. Can you share more insights on this in a layman's term, like a person like me who's typically probably not an engineer, I'm not a techie. I understand a bit of technology, and I live through it on a daily basis. But for a layman like me and many of us out there, what does this AI future look like? And I have a few more questions around the same line, but just from your book perspective, what does it look like?
So I wrote Future Visions about a week after ChatGPT was launched. So I think I was the first person
Okay.
in the world to publish a book written by ChatGPT. And it took me 5 days to write, and it was sort of it was an experiment, to understand these technologies, and that's one of the messages that I always tell, Fortune 500 companies when I provide my insights to them is start experimenting, and start playing with these technologies, because only then you truly understand what what's happening. So that's what I did. ChatGPT was launched. Within a week, I was writing a book with ChatGPT, and it very much helped me understand how to interact with this new technology that was now available to the masses. And it sort of I quickly learned that asking the right questions, that what we now call prompt engineering, is absolutely crucial if you want to have a better outcome. So that was really fascinating for me to understand that if we want to collaborate with AI, if we want to have this human
Hmm.
machine collaboration, we need to be able to ask the right questions. And the interesting thing is, of course, now we have entered an era where we no longer need to learn the language of the computer, but the computer has learned the language of us. But that doesn't mean that we can just ramble around and just talk whatever we want. We still need to be able to talk in a way that makes sense to the computer. So I think that for me was one of the really interesting insights when I wrote that book. I also quickly noticed that these models, they hallucinate, although that wasn't a term 2 years ago, but it became a term quite quickly afterwards. Because at some point I asked it, how did robotics and AI converge? And it said, in the 1980s, robotics and AI converged to create self-driving cars. And I thought to myself, oh, that would have been nice if that would have been the case. Our cities would have looked completely different nowadays. So I quickly noticed that there is a lot of hallucinations going on in these technologies. And that brings me to a point which I think is quite important, because I think um, if we want to collaborate with machines, I think there are two things that are important. First of all, we need to be aware that they hallucinate. That um, it is not necessarily intelligence. It's a prediction machine that predicts the next word or the next token, given a certain context, given a sort of settings, given a sort of the word that comes ahead, that comes first. So that's important. So it's a parrot. So it
Yeah.
repeats of what it has learned. It doesn't have actual intelligence embedded in it. The second thing, which I think is really important in our future, where we move to an AI-driven future, is that we should stop anthropomorphizing artificial intelligence. I think and with that I mean that we attribute human characteristics to these machines. I catch myself
Hmm.
sometimes off guard that I talk about ChatGPT like a he or a she, and I think that this is something that we
Mm.
absolutely should stop, because we should
Should
have
stop.
sort of this distance between the human and the machine. That's also why I wonder, and I don't have an answer to that necessarily, but why are we creating humanoids that look like humans? Why aren't we creating a robot that is distinct from humans, and therefore maybe can be more relevant and useful in us? I think we should have, and for those who have to watch the movie Ex Machina, or the movie Her, you sort of understand what can happen when we are becoming detached to these machines. And I think we should be really careful about it. So, understand that the AI that we currently have today is not necessarily, I wouldn't consider as intelligence, and do not anthropomorphize the machines, because I think that will harm us in the long run. So, and
Wow.
then the final thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is if we look at intelligence, yes, the current large language models, I don't consider them as being intelligent, but I do believe that there is no upper limit to intelligence, which means that in the next decades, we will create an intelligent being, a machine or whatsoever, or artificial life form that might be infinitely more intelligent than the human race. And I think that's both exciting and terrifying. And I think we
Terrifying.
should be aware of that as well. But yes, as I said, again, I wouldn't consider the current large language models as being intelligent. They are very good parrots. They know how to predict the next word, but it doesn't attribute any meaning to it as we do humans.
Fantastic. Awesome. Again, a lot of insights into that one particular answer. What I would do, I would go back and listen to this probably again. But I think there's a lot of insight to our audience in that particular answer. It also leads me to the next question, but I will park for that. I have somebody named Vignesh, who is asking this question on a live format. Hi, Vignesh. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Dr. Mark. For some people, coding is a nightmare. How can someone like us learn and excel in a, a AI domain? I think he followed up with another question which is similar. For some, coding can be a nightmare. How can people from non-IT background learn to code better? Any insights to this, Dr. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Vignesh. That's a really, really good question. I think, as I just mentioned, we no longer have to learn the language of the computer. The computer has learned the language of us, and that makes it a lot easier to code, because we can just tell the computer what we want. Now, that doesn't mean that the outcomes are necessarily perfect. I think, just like when we use ChatGPT for language, it might still hallucinate. It might still come up with nonsense, and we still have to check it, and we still have to work with it. So you should still learn the different programming languages that are relevant to you. So because only then you understand if someone wrote if the a machine wrote something incorrectly. It's the same thing. I don't speak Hindi. If someone says to me something in Hindi, I have no idea whether that's good or bad. And whether it's right or wrong. So that's the same thing with with coding. You still want to learn the language so you can see to what extent what the machine has given you is actually correct or incorrect. But it definitely helps you. It definitely speeds up. I've used it in the companies that I develop, where we use the ChatGPT to spin out some HTML code. We review it, and it's like, oh, it's actually pretty good, and we can implement it. But you should still have the capacity and the capabilities to think about it, to look at it, to analyze it, and to improve it if necessary.
Fantastic. I hope that answers to your question, Vignesh. And while we are on it, Vignesh is in a flow, and he has already typed another question. So I will pop it up. Could you please share your thoughts on how to learn and improve on prompt engineering? I hope this doesn't become an engineering discussion, Vignesh, but I will take that question for
now. Well, it's a good question, and I think what we should be aware of that. There's so many tools out there on the internet. There's so many YouTube videos, so many articles. But I think most importantly, there are two things: provide context and ask questions. If you provide the right context, it completely changes the answer of the machine. So if you want to write a marketing message for your platform, if you just say, "Here's the tool A, provide a marketing message," you get an answer. It's decent, but it's average. If you provide the right context to the machine and say, well, you are a senior marketeer in the domain of insurance companies in Southeast Asia, and etc. etc. So you provide a lot of context to the machine, then you will see that you get a much better answer. That's one thing. The second thing is that you should be able to ask questions. Ask the questions to the machine.
Right.
You get answers back. Ask questions again. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. And I think that is really, really important, because if you don't do that, it will become really difficult to get the right answer out of the machine. And so from that perspective, provide context, ask the right question. For your information, the prompts that we use in our tools, they are 10, 12, 14 pages long. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how far you can take this.
Wow. Okay. I'm not going to go to that level of complexity, but I'll go to a very simple question, Dr. Mark, which is next. And you did touch base upon it, and I think you have a very candid opinion about it. And I'm going to ask you, the recent updated prototype version of Optimus Tesla bot, the robotic humanoid showcased recently by Elon, the world watched it, we all watched it, I watched it. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, and I'll come to you on that. Do you think in the next 5 to 10 years, or probably earlier, we as humans will be embracing having robots in our daily lives and moving around with us? The reason I ask you this is I did show that video of that robot in your house doing the household chores, probably serving you a drink, and I showed it to my son as well. Now, the future generation is looking at it as if, the robots are going to be part of our lives. For our generation, I am still a little terrified of walking onto the streets or going into a coffee shop and suddenly being embraced by a robot. Now, my question, very, very honestly to you is this going to be our future? Because he is selling them at whatever 30,000, 40,000 US dollars eventually.
Well, I think first of all, uh, Elon Musk did use a bit of smoke and mirrors because the Tesla
Mm,
Optimus were controlled remotely with people wearing VR glasses. So it wasn't autonomous humanoids already. So that's important to be aware of.
okay.
Um, that having said, humanoids are coming. The integration of large language, of multimodal large language models, and humanoids that become much better at balancing and running at doing all kinds of tasks. That is happening. And I think Elon Musk made the prediction that by 2040 there will be 1 billion humanoids working across the world. I think that's sort of a reasonable thing to expect. Um,
Wow.
is that good or bad? I think it will happen. It will change society. It will offer benefits. For example, it will make I don't know healthcare much more accessible. So we will see aged care facilities which are run entirely by humanoids and maybe one human at the top at a fraction of the price that we have aged care facilities today. Is that good? Again, is that good or bad? Yes, it becomes more affordable. But do we want to be have an aged care facility run only by humanoids? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're much better than us in doing that. So we don't know yet, but that it will happen, I think, is a certainty. Will we move into the Jetsons era where we have a humanoid in our house? Yeah, could be. But then, how do we deal with that humanoid? Are we going to treat it as a slave, or are we going to treat it as a companion? As a friend in the household. These are very, very important things to think of when we deal with these kind of things. And I think the world is not yet ready for that at all. So we need a lot of education. We need a lot of thinking in this regard of
Thinking.
how to deal with this kind of new situation. But humanoids will become a big part of our lives, and I think it will be a matter of time before we see humanoids in your office, and at first
In
they
a
are
coffee
still
shop.
yeah. At first, they are still expensive, but expensive is relative. If you have to spend $30,000 to buy a humanoid versus you have to pay $50,000 to get an employee, to hire an employee, it makes complete sense to just go for the humanoid because it's a lot cheaper in the long run. So it's that's sort of the balance that we have to look at. But yeah, it will have a big impact on our society. Yeah, for sure.
Gosh, that is for some people of us, at least. I don't want to reveal my age on a podcast. A lot of people know it. But having said that, I come from the generation of pagers. We used to start with Motorola pagers to now seeing a humanoid right in front of us and probably partnering with us in doing some of the activities. I think we will come a full circle in terms of what life is showing at us from a digital footprint perspective.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the topic is: digital future. Um, Moving on to the next one. Thanks for that. That's really, really, really interesting. And that little piece, I'm going to show it to my son as well, that he will grow up having probably some humanoids around him, which is scary, interesting, terrifying, whatever you want to name it. But it is the future. Um, you mentioned somewhere in one of your articles AI building AI with an AI driven economy on the horizon at this point in time. Then it leads to the real question is, will humans still matter in this self sufficient AI ecosystem in future? And your thoughts around it?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a very philosophical question as well. I think is what is going to be left for us in a world where AI can be creative, and in a world where AI can create apps autonomously, in a world where we have humanoids in our factory and in our aged care facilities and in our hospitals. What's going to be left for us? And I think that is a really, really thorny question that we need to answer really quickly because this is going to happen faster than we think. And so it's work gives us humans meaning to life. Whether it's even if it's a crappy job that you don't like, it still gives you meaning. It still gets you out of bed in the morning. And if we take it away from people, I think we'll have a big problem. So we have to find a way where we can craft a society where we still have meaning in our lives, and we still have we still enjoy living, and we're not bored to death, like, because there's nothing to do. And yes, we might be living in a world where everything is free because everything is produced by robots, which some people, who believe in the singularity, think that's where it's heading. Um, but is that a good thing? I don't have answers here. I'm just asking. I'm just
Okay.
posing the questions. I mean, I think
Mm.
we need to think about these kind of things of what is the society that we want to build, because as we've done in the past 30 years, we sort of have sleepwalked into this digital age. We have not actively proactively thought about how are we going to, what kind of internet do we want to build, what kind of long-term implications do we envision when it comes to the internet. As a result, we have manipulation, we have polarization, we have misinformation thriving on social media, which is causing death and destruction in our societies. Now, if we think that, if we take that to the next level and look at the age of intelligence, or the intelligence age, where I think polarization, manipulation, and misinformation will explode, and it will be like the current social media issues will look like child's play compared to the issues that we'll get. So we have to take a proactive approach of what kind of future do we want to build. And that's my message that I give to individuals, to organizations, to governments. We are the builders of the future. We are the architects of tomorrow, and we are empowered to build a future that we want to build. But that means that we have to think about it today, and we can't just sleepwalk into the future. We can't just be a passive a passenger on the train to tomorrow. We have to think about what's going on, and I think that's often forgotten. And that's something I think there's a lot of work to be done, is to take a different approach here.
Wow, nice. Very interesting. And when you say that, it kind of leads me. I know you're doing a lot of talking. You can have a little sip of water, Dr. Mark. Uh, it leads me to the thing that, and we are seeing, with the preteens, the teens, the Gen Zs having major level of mental health crisis. And because you very rightly said, we've sleepwalked into a technology era where a lot of us were not used to this. And now that we are kind of embracing it on a daily basis, the amount of content we are consuming on a daily basis is having an impact. So what is within our control as humans, whether it is organizations or anything? What is any top three simple steps we can do to ensure there is a level of sanctity maintained while we still embrace it, because we can't run away from?
Well, I think, from what we can do personally is educate ourselves, become aware of what's happening. I think what we can do on a societal level is hold big tech more accountable to what's happening, so that we're not sleepwalking, but we're actually awake, and understand what's going on. And that's very much linked to a story that went sort of viral on the internet yesterday, where a 14-year-old guy committed suicide.
Yeah.
14-year-old kid committed suicide after talking to a character.ai chatbot. And sort of the character.ai chatbot sort of encouraged him to commit suicide, and he did. And which is is a terribly, terribly, terribly sad example. And unfortunately, he's not the only one. This happens all the time. And I think it's a failure in our society that we cannot hold accountable the big tech companies who are building these technologies, and that we are just so profit driven, and that we're not focused on building a technology space that's there for us, and not only for the shareholders of those big tech companies. And what I mean with that is, why should kids have a social media account before 14 or before 16? Why should kids be having access to these AI bots that nobody taught them how to use them? Nobody taught them how to interact with them. Nobody taught them how to weigh whatever they're saying, simply because we ourselves don't know. So why are we giving these powerful tools to kids who are very prone to addiction, simply because their brain is not yet developed? Why aren't we preventing them from having access to these devices and these tools? And the answer is super simple. We should put the requirement on the big tech companies and say, well, if you don't prevent this from happening, you just go to jail, Mr. CEO. It's very simple. And I can guarantee you that if we take that approach, it will happen really quickly. And it's the fact that we are not taking this a stand here, that governments around the world are just almost bullied into whatever the shareholders want. I think just blows my mind. It's all driven
Mm.
through profit. It's all a capitalistic approach. How can I make as much money by keeping people as engaged as long as possible from as early on into our apps? I think that's the wrong approach. I do believe in the power of these technologies, that they can really contribute to society and make society better. But we do have to take a step back and think of how we want to give these technologies to the next generation, who is still so vulnerable becoming addicted and can't really understand what's happening here. So yeah, I take a really strong stand here, and I think it's work is necessary around the world, and more work needs to be done.
Nice, really, really nice. I mean, I really appreciate you being very, very candid, Dr. Mark, right out here, and I really appreciate your insights into this. I somewhere, my next question was also around how do we humanize our digital future, but actually, honestly, you more or less answered it at this point in time. So I'll pause that question. But we have Akash with us, who's asking us a question on LinkedIn, and I'm just going to pop it up right away. Hey, Akash. Hello, Dr. Mark. My question is, will AI and humanites be 100% trustworthy and accurate in the future? I'm reminded of a scene from a movie where a robot ship was changed, leading it to distort what was meant to be a peaceful society. How do we plan to tackle potential issues like this? Nice one, Akash. I do remember that movie as well. Go ahead, Dr. Mark.
Well, thank you, Akash. A really good question. I think it all revolves around what kind of AI do we want to build, and how are we going to build this AI. And again, we shouldn't be sleepwalking into this new age, this new intelligent age. We actually should stop and think a little bit. But that's really hard because we are in the arms race. But I think if we build the moral values of our society into the technology that we're building, then we have a chance to achieve that. Now that's extremely hard because my morals might differ from your morals, my ethics might differ from your ethics, our collective ethics might differ today from tomorrow, from yesterday. So this is all constantly changing. So this is extremely difficult. That's also why I think we should have more humanists and you're being involved in the development of these tools, so we have a better understanding, more ethicists being involved in development of these technology, because we need to. These are very, very hard questions that we need to answer today, and not just let it happen to us. So. I don't think it will be that. It will be that easy to change the chip and you get an angry humanoid. I'm not afraid of humanoids roaming the street and killing everyone, just like on
Watching
RoboCop,
movies.
the different movies.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to embed how we would like to see tomorrow's society into the AI engine that we are building, and I don't think we're doing that enough.
Nice, nice. Hope that answers to you, Akash. And yes, sometimes they show the movies. Sometimes you've seen the cartoons which predicted the future much, much, much in advance. Okay, we are 15 minutes into the last 15 minutes into our podcast. Time has flown by. Do kind of keep coming in with your questions. I have a few more, Dr. Mark, and we will keep the last 5 minutes for an interesting discussion as well. So, in your articles and videos, and I was fortunate enough to even hear you live recently in Bali. Um, you have mentioned about holograms or our digital twins. You are one of the first person in the world to kind of even implement it and showcase it to the world. Uh, is this going to be the future that I might be somebody like me might be physically in one place giving a talk and my digital twin will be speaking on behalf of me somewhere else? Can you just share some light around this?
Well, I think that's definitely going to happen. It's we humans, we're not made for 2D, and the conversation we're currently having is a 2D conversation. You know, you are on my screen as a 2D Vikram, and vice
Hmm.
versa. And we are not made for that. We are made for 3D, for a much more spatial experience. So from that perspective, it just makes total sense, and we move to an era where I can sit with you around the table, or you are in Kuala Lumpur and I'm in Sydney, but it feels like we are both present. And that will probably
Both.
work with some kind of glasses, some kind of augmented reality glasses that will project your hologram onto the chair next to me, and vice versa. And we can have that conversation as if we are sitting next to each other. And then people might join in as sort of being the audience of that, and seeing both of us sitting at that holographic table in your own kitchen, in your own living room, while you just chill out on your couch and you have two people us sitting in front of you having a conversation. That is going to be the future. Absolutely, 100%. I'm confident about that. When will this happen? Not tomorrow, not in the next 2 to 3 years, because the technology is simply not ready for that. But towards the end of this decade, that is going to be a future. I believe that early 2030s, we won't need a phone anymore. We won't need a laptop anymore. It will all be much more spatial, much more holographic, much more augmented reality. So I think that's a really cool future to look forward to, because it's much more aligned to how we are as humans, and how we like to operate. So I think that is really cool. So if we look at from a speaking perspective, and yes, I did share that in Bali, where I was fortunate enough to give the opening keynote to 300 of the best speakers around the world, which was an amazing experience by itself.
Yes.
Where holographic projections as a speaker will happen as well, and I've done some holographic keynotes. It's really awesome to do that, and to have that possibility to speak at multiple locations at once, is something that is, I think, really really fascinating. You can have a Fortune 500 company who has a town hall session across multiple locations, and you appear at all locations at the same time, speaking in local languages at the same time, and it's all being driven by one person, the real you. I think that's going to happen. Fascinating, and offers a lot of opportunity.
Wow. Excellent. I'm looking forward to that day. Probably I'm a much more established speaker at that point in time, that I'm probably speaking somewhere in Cairns, and my digital, twin is speaking somewhere in the US or in the UK, which is going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, amazing insights just to see what future would look like on that one. To continue on that space, in our workforce today, a lot of organizations are facing this challenge because we have the baby boomers who have seen kind of from no technology to the part of technology where we are. We have the Gen X. I think I've pretty much revealed my age, but I'm pretty much the Gen X at this point in time. So we have the Gen X who have seen again the entire spectrum from a pager to where we are and using a smartphone really efficiently, and now even looking at AI. Then the millennials who have kind of embedded this into their lives very well, and the Gen Zs who are pretty much used to this on a daily basis, and they are the ones who are really using it like anything. How do you think AI will play a role in a multi generational workforce given where the organizations are going?
That's a very good question. And I think sort of the issue that I foresee at the moment, is that a lot of organizations see AI as sort of the savior of a lot of cost, and making the organization a lot more effective. And take the legal industry. Law
Hmm.
firms, junior lawyers, junior barristers are often required to do a lot of the research, a lot of
Hmm.
the groundwork, the hard work, not the nicest work, but really important work. Also for you to learn the profession as a lawyer. Um, in many law firms, this job is now being moved to AI, and
Hmm.
that is a problem, because what is the junior lawyer going to do then? He or she doesn't have the experience to be a full-fledged lawyer yet, but there's no jobs, because the job that a junior lawyer would normally do is now being done by AI. And I think a lot of organizations will sort of run into a wall a few years from now, where they have gone full speed ahead with this, and haven't really thought about the consequences if there is no more next generation of lawyers waiting to start when the current generation of lawyers is sort of signing off. And I think that is going to be a
Mm.
real problem. It's going to be a problem for the next generation, the Gen Zs that are finishing university and want to get a job. And it's going to be a problem for the millennials and the Gen X who are finishing and who are running these companies, because there's no one to follow up on that. So this is going to be a really important issue. The other issue is that the baby boomers who are sort of signing off, as we speak, from the workforce around the world, is that they are often much more detached, and this is very generalizing, but they're often much more
Mm.
detached from technology, and that gap between the millennials and the Gen Zs that
And
do
the
find a
baby.
job, who are native in this space, and the baby boomers who are not native in this space and often have no idea how this whole space works. I think that gap there's a friction between that, and that's really challenging for organizations, and that's one of the reasons why I am recommend organizations you should do education through all levels of your organization, to make sure that everyone understands what is happening.
Nice. Interesting. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And there is also, for the audience and for everybody else, there is also a Gen Alpha, which is going to come very soon in another 5 to 8 years. And they are the ones, which kind of brings me to the next question, but they are the ones who are going to school today and understanding what AI is,
We
because
should
they
we should
go to
not
the
call them
school.
Gen we should not call them Gen Alpha. We should call them Gen AI, because that's who they are.
Yeah, that's what they're going to be. So, and literally nicely, it kind of brings to the next question of, AI is being taught in schools. Kids are using, I'm just going to take a simple example, Canva also has an AI part to it, and now the kids understand in schools that there is AI into their life. So they are, if you look at again from a futurist perspective, in the next 15 years, they are going to graduate from schools, colleges, and they are literally going to be embedded into AI from day one. They already are. So, what does this look like? Is this something again to be scared of, or we just embed as part of our lives?
Well, I think we should just, it's the future. That's the way the world is going to be. And you can retract yourself from it and go live on an island in the middle of the sea, and detach yourself from it. That's all all good. Don't let me stop you from doing that. I think, but I think it is going to be the future that AI plays a really, really important role. So requiring, which happens in quite a few schools now, or preventing students from using AI and punishing students who do use AI, I think is really problematic. We really should do the absolute opposite. ChatGPT or Claude or Llama 3 or any of the other large language models, they are not going to go away. So being an ostrich and putting your head in the sand and just saying, well, we're going to prohibit you from using these technologies, is just the stupidest thing that you can do. So instead, we should, teach them how to use these technologies. Tell them what the implications are when you use them. Educate them on how to use these technologies, how to ask the right questions to get the best answers. That's what we should do. Telling students that you cannot use them, and using these so-called AI detectors, which don't work, to sort of find students who might or might not have used AI to craft the content, and then punish them, I think is just the stupidest thing that we can do. So we should change our educational system, to teach them how to use this technology, and that's not happening
At this
almost
point?
anywhere, and that's really disturbing.
Okay. Okay. Again, a lot of futuristic part of Dr. Mark's answer, something to ponder upon, something to think about for a lot of people, not only who are watching this, but will also watch this at a later point in time in terms of Dr. Mark's thoughts. Um, I'm going to go kind of wrap up to the last question, and then we have a little bit of a fun segment because it's a very interesting discussion. So we might just go a little over an hour. Hope that is fine with you, Dr. Mark. Um, we have spoken about the advantages and the benefits of AI or the digital future. We spoke about that it is going to be part of our life, it is going to be something which is embedded with us, and all the good things around it. Can you share, and I know you would share, I heard a little bit about that before as well, but I really want you to share, what are the disadvantages of it? What's the scary part which we are not seeing as humans at this point in time? And if you can, what can we do, or is there anything we can do to mitigate the risk? All yours.
Well, I think the scary part is very much focused on the misuse of these technologies on the one hand. So yeah, the polarization and manipulation and misinformation that will occur because of these technologies. I think that's a really scary part. It can really have a negative impact on our global society. And the other part is the jobs. I foresee that by the end of this decade, AI will kill 1 billion jobs. That's about 20% of the global workforce. So I think that is really problematic as well, because we're not really thinking about how to deal with that. So AI has a lot of potential to improve society, but especially these two are very, very, problematic, and we need to make sure that we deal with it in the right way.
Okay. I was not planning for this while we are at it. Hey, thanks, Suguna. Thanks so much. You just mentioned a nice little comment. Well done, Vikram and Dr. Mark. Thank you, Suguna. I really appreciate you listening to us live, and also for your kind words. But that also brings us, I had asked this question in one of my podcasts before, Dr. Mark, but I'll ask you as well. When we say a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, which a lot of people are scared of also, that, what can they do? So, I mean, one of the answers I received from one of our guest speakers also was, and his name is Umang, what he shared was that you should know how to adapt AI into your daily lives. You should at least understand, because if you don't do that, you will be pretty much extinguished. You will not be there in future. So is that what it is, or is there anything else you would recommend?
No, I think that's completely true. I believe that if you that by 2030 there will be two types of companies: those companies that use AI and those companies that don't exist. It's that simple.
Simple.
And I think that also applies to humans. If you want to have a job towards the end of this decade, make sure that you embrace AI. Period. And how can you do that? You need to educate yourself. You need to experiment with the technology, and then you need to execute on those experiments. Those are the the takeaways that I want you to take home. Is don't stop here. Start integrating it in your lives. It's actually very simple.
Fantastic. It is very simple. It was very cut. It was like a cutthroat, very clear. You have to do this. There is no option, and kind of go for it. And which is very true, because a lot of us are, I mean, at least to the people I interact with, a lot of us want to embrace. A lot of us are scared of embracing it. A lot of us, I also know people who just shy away from it, like just park it behind closed doors for now. I don't want to look at it. And it's a lot of mixed feelings at this point in time. And that is why, time and again I ask this question in my podcast, because people out there need to know that by the end of this decade, like you rightly said, it is going to be a challenge for people who have not for people who are not adopting it. And that comes from a LinkedIn user. The message is strong and clear: adopt AI. Thank you so much. I don't know your identity. I hope it's not a chatbot. Just to put it in a little fun way, I know it is a user who's using it, but thank you so much for mentioning that. Now, we are right on the hour, and generally I do wrap up by then, but then we also have something, Dr. Mark, because we've had such a nice discussion around kind of a little complex area of AI and digital future. There is a little bit of a fun rapid fire round. We call it the FRFR in my Curious Mind series podcast. So this is knowing a little bit about you in a fun way, and that's it. And after that, we will kind of wrap it up. Are you ready for that?
Of course.
Okay, fantastic. Let's go. Okay, that was not a chatbot. That is ET Courier. So hi ET, that is really nice. I had to kind of do a leading question. ET, I know you understand what I mean. So hi ET, that's really nice of you to send that across to us. So going on to the fun rapid fire round, having traveled the world, 30 countries across continents, which is your favorite place and why?
Oh, there's so many favorite places around the world. I very much enjoy where I live at the moment. I always enjoy visiting new countries that I've never been to. I like Singapore a lot, where there's a lot of things happening, sort of the city of the future. I like being in nature. So there's so many places I like to be. So I'm yeah, very fortunate that I can travel so much.
Okay, fantastic. Interesting question. Next one. How much percentage of AI do you use in your daily life?
Well, you might be talking to a digital twin. Who knows?
Now I'm scared. I'm just glad that I met you in person before, otherwise, it would not have
So yeah, so,
okay.
so I use it a lot. I use it all the time. I'm interacting with AI constantly, and I think everyone should.
Okay. Okay. One fun fact about you, which no one knows, and it's going to be revealed now on this live podcast.
One fun fact: I'm writing my sixth book.
Oh, wow. Okay. There you go. So, all the people who do follow Dr. Mark out there and the digital future, the sixth book is coming, and he has revealed it right here on this podcast. Thank you so much. Fourth question. We have five to go for. An incident where something you've done a lot of speaking on stage. You're a keynote speaker and you're a fantastic speaker, no doubts about it. Like I said, I've had the privilege of listening to you. An incident where something went wrong on stage, and what did you do?
Well, there's always something happening. Yeah, I remember one time I was on stage, and we tested everything the night before, and everything worked perfectly. And then the moment I went on stage, nothing worked, and I just had to improvise for 20 minutes. And then they finally managed to get my slides up and running, but they turned it into a low quality PDF. So none of the interactions, none of the videos, nothing worked. That was pretty much a disaster, but they still loved my talk anyway.
That's excellent. At least I'm sure the content covered up for all the lack of technical mishap. Okay, the last question. The last question. If you weren't living this life of a futurist, do you ever think what would you be otherwise?
Um, I think I would probably be either a dive instructor or operating a wine bar, or both at once.
Or both at once, and probably have a digital twin there. But that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, that kind of very interesting. I came to know a little bit more about you, Dr. Mark, through a very virtual way than in person. But thank you so much for coming on to the Curious Mind series podcast. I have tons of other questions. We can go for another hour, to be honest. But I think we need to limit ourselves within the hour. But to our audience who are listening to Dr. Mark, firstly, thank you so much for listening to us live. You can go and visit him on LinkedIn. I'm sure he will answer your questions there also, because he has the right intentions towards a better world for all of us. And you can also go to his website on the digitalspeaker.com. It is there into his LinkedIn. So just feel free to connect with Dr. Mark. And we thank all the audience for joining us. And for some of you who asked your questions and also appreciated us, I really appreciate. Any parting words, Dr. Mark, from you, because you are the futurist?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. And I think, remember, we are all the builders of the future. So take that role seriously.
Fantastic, fantastic. So remember, we are all the builders of a future. What we are doing today, to the people of my generation, I've already said I'm Gen X. I'm not going to ask Dr. Mark what generation he falls in. You guys can guess very clearly. But to the people right here, what we do today is going to impact our generations for future. So be very, very mindful of how we are not only embedding AI, but what we are doing around it for the better future of lives for everyone. On that note, thank you, Dr. Mark. Once again, I really appreciate. Thank you to the audience for coming in on the show. And I'm going to end right here for all of us. Have a nice Friday ahead. Take care. Bye, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.